At the moment, we are at Olympia, and Olympia is the size of 19 football fields. So I have never felt so small in my life, and it's something I needed probably, so it was good for me. And I'm the chairman of the illustration jury, and not only have I had a chance to see this year's illustration entries to design and art direction, but I've had a chance to see the design entries and so forth, and I think D&AD has reached the same standards as any exhibition of this sort of stuff in the world. Where New York used to be the standard, it's just no longer the case. I think D&AD is on the same level, and that's nice. Which countries are strongest in illustration and design? It's where the money is. If Germany has a big advertising industry, then the standards are high because the competition is great. And that would apply to France and Britain and I think most of the Western world. I think having seen lots of Indian and Japanese entries, I think by their own cultural standards, they're just as high, but they're not quite the same. So it's very hard to compare. I wouldn't even presume to compare Japanese design and advertising to Western. They have a different take on things. Well, I started D&AD. I guess that would make me having something to do with it, right? Although I certainly wasn't the only one. My two wonderful partners from Fletcher, Forbes and Gill, Alan Fletcher and Colin Forbes, also were involved. And other designers in London at the time, in the 60s, like Derek Bertzel and Peter Wilbur and Dolby and so forth, were also involved because we felt we needed a showcase. And at that time, the only organization that even presumed to show work was the Society of Industrial Designers. And they were just so moribund and so old-fashioned and so, you know, when they invited us to belong, it was nice to be asked, but we wouldn't, it just didn't seem, it was a different generation. In fact, just for the fun of it, I said when we refused and thanked them for the offer, refusing to join, I said, well, why don't we have a big discussion so that the whole design and advertising field could attend and we could air some of these things. I said, why don't we call the debate the SIA is full of shit. They liked the idea of a debate, but they were less happy with my suggestion for a name. Anyway, we compromised, and we ended up calling the debate "Why Join the SIA?" And I remember Colin Forbes took the negative, and somebody from the SIA who was 106 took the affirmative, and it was interesting, but we ended up starting D&AD, not joining the SIA. Now, what I don't understand, what is very weird to me, is here am I, 47 years old, and yet 50 years ago I started D&AD. That's always, I don't even go into it. It's not something I want to pursue. It's fun to come back and see, you know, how they've grown. I don't know how many people belong or how many, but there were thousands of entries into the exhibition. And I remember I've judged the New York show several times, and they didn't have any more entries than D&AD. The only thing I could say really about the work is that, which was interesting to me, was that there was a lot of very, very fine work. Terrific. Very little work in the middle, and there was some terrible work. But I guess that's the way it always is. I've been teaching for over 50 years, and a few of the things that I say in a general way, I still believe in. First of all, one of the things that I believe, honestly, is that there's no such thing as a bad client. There are only bad designers. The big myth is, oh, if we didn't have such a dopey client, the amazing things we could produce. It's a myth, because part of our function is to shove these things down people's throats, and if we can't do that, then we're in the wrong field. Also, it would be ridiculous if the clients were as knowledgeable and as adept in design as we are, then they wouldn't need us. So it's a ridiculous statement to say, if only we had better clients. No, we need better designers. The other advice I would give is that your portfolio as a young designer is worth its weight in gold. Therefore, if because you have to earn money and you don't have a reputation and so forth, and you work for design groups or advertising agencies that are less than inspired, so you don't really produce very good work, that's no reason to be represented by this mediocre work. What you have to do is spend every waking hour going to bookstores, as an example, and you just redesigning books, redesigning. If you're interested in fishing, you'll see a book on fishing, redesign it, redesign the covers, build up your portfolio. After all, the nice thing about technology is that every young designer has a computer and a printer, and they could print samples that look printed, obviously, so there's no way of telling whether it's a sample or a printed job. So that's really the most important thing, is for designers to spend as much time as possible to produce as brilliant a portfolio as possible, so they don't have to stay in this dopey job that they're complaining about, because people are looking for good problem solvers. Incidentally, the young designer could read any one of my 19 books if they want to know something about the process of getting a good idea, because that's how I spend all of my teaching time.